1. My house has a driveway that serves as almost like an alleyway connecting the two streets parallel to the house. The actual roads that connect the two are a couple of minutes' drive in either directions, so since I park in the garage, not the driveway, I have no problem with people using it as a shortcut between the two streets. But it is technically, legally, part of my property. I do all the maintenance and upkeep on it, and I need to use it every day to turn into my garage. So while I don't mind people using it as a shortcut, I expect people who do use it with frequency to be mindful of the fact that it is technically an extension of my home. But I have these neighbors who apparently felt entitled to the use of my throughway. This became clear to me when one day, just a bit after I moved in, I pulled into my driveway and was sitting in my car finishing up a phone conversation. I see a car pull up behind me, but didn't think much of it at the time. They started flashing their brights, but I didn't really register it. Once you've pulled in, it's damn near impossible to back out because of brick walls on either side. But there is space enough for two cars to pass if maneuvered carefully. So instead of passing me, these people got out of their car and testily knocked on my window. I rolled down my window to see what they wanted, and they basically said, "Excuse me, move along." I told them this was my driveway and they were free to go around. "Other people use this lane, so if you're gonna sit around, do the decent thing and pull in." This became a major source of contention with them through the years, but they're old, so I kept thinking they'd die or move. I hate confrontation, really makes me deeply uncomfortable, so it was always less stressful for me to just move my car than argue with them. If I had visitors and they parked in the driveway, these people would call and complain, and I'd have to get my visitor to circle the block so they could drive through. In hindsight, it was always a pretty crazy accommodation to be making. At one point, my wife thought we should try and snuff out this dynamic by just parking in the driveway, but they came over and complained that we were blocking the way. I told them I had a right to park there, and they said, "You're really gonna make everyone drive to the end of the block because you can't pull in?" And my wife wasn't home, so I caved. Fast forward to today. I had just returned from a very long and stressful day at work. I was idling in the driveway, waiting for the garage door to open, when they pulled in behind me and immediately began shining their brights. Again, there is space for another car to go around. So they couldn't even be bothered to make the effort to squeeze past me while I waited for the garage door to open. So just as the garage door opened and I was preparing to turn in, they honked. Not even an "are you paying attention" honk, an aggressive honk. That was it for me. I parked diagonally across the driveway, blocking any space to maneuver around. Not that they were using it. Remember, it's extremely difficult to back out of this space because it's enclosed by brick walls on either side. I got out and said, "I don't want you driving through here anymore." And they said that they had every right and I was inconveniencing them just for sport, and that they demanded I move my car. I told them not until they promised to be respectful of the fact that it's my driveway, not a public road. They continued nattering on, so I just went inside, leaving my car there. They came and knocked on the door, thinking my wife would be a more sympathetic character. They have never spoken to her. But I told her what I had just done and she loved it. She didn't come to the door, but then the husband of the neighbor couple screamed that if I didn't move my car he would hotwire it and move it himself. So I said through the door, "Touch my car and I'll call the police." And I guess that gave them an idea. "Don't bother, we're calling the police," the old lady squawked as they waddled back to their car. So my wife and I switched our lights off, locked our doors, went into a room in the middle of the house, and started watching the security cameras on my tablet. Great view of the driveway, audio too. It was a thing of beauty like I haven't seen in years. The cops arrived, and the neighbors began digging themselves a hole right away, by first trying to play dumb, saying, "Someone's car is blocking the road," as though they didn't just have an altercation with us. The cops were like, I'm not even sure this is a road. Looks like it might be an extended driveway. And the neighbors were insistent. No, it's a road. We've lived in this neighborhood 40 years. We know the roads. Tow it. Like they would know the streets of the city better than police officers. The officers took pity on them and said they would see if the owners of the driveway were home to move the car so they could get by. But in the future, they shouldn't try and use private property to pass through. I was already feeling vindicated and could tell even through the cameras that my neighbors were heating up with rage. The police came and knocked on the door, even tried the back door, but our lights were off and we stayed quiet as mice. The cops returned and said, "They don't appear to be home." Here's where it gets great. The neighbors undo their own story, saying that they know we're home because they saw us go in after we refused to move our car. So the officers realized there was a social component the neighbors withheld from them all this time, and are far less pitying now. They gave a stern speech about only calling for emergencies and not wasting the time of first responders and drove off. Amazingly, after they left, the neighbors called 911 again to complain about their first experience with the police and that they didn't solve the problem. We couldn't tell what the operators said to them, but no more police came. So they banged on the door furiously for a bit, but it was now starting to get dark, and I think they realized we were serious about leaving the car there. So this is where it gets greatest. They tried to back out. I have to hand it to the old man. He got 3/4 of the way out, faster than I would have gotten. Then, just as he was turning to get entirely out onto the street, there was a deafening scrape that we could hear inside the house, even without the camera audio. And he completely shattered a headlight and eviscerated a portion of his front bumper. At this point, his wife walked the half a block home, but he got out and pounded on my door some more. For a second, I thought he might pop a hinge. But eventually he drove off, and I went out and took a piece of glass to remember this revenge by, confident that the big streak of paint on the brick wall would be reminder enough to never bother me in my driveway again. Once we were sure they were gone, we pulled into the garage so no random unsuspecting cars would get stuck. 2. So for some background, I worked at a hospital for 2 years during college, and in those 2 years I had 3 different managers. The first manager was a cool guy, and I had an incident where I was sent home early from work almost every day for about a month. This was normal. If you were discharged from a patient, and there wasn't another to go to, you were sent home on standby. Somehow, all of those times I was told to go home on standby, the person who told me to go home coded it wrong into the system, and it showed that I called out all of those days, which gives you points. 14 points equals termination. Because of this, I somehow racked up 7 points, enough for a verbal warning, and got a call from my manager during class. I answered, he told me what was going on, and I ended up proving I was there all those days and was sent home by the supervisor. I thought it was a done deal. We got a new manager after that, and she was cool but only stayed for about 3 months. Enter the crazy manager. Annual evaluations were coming up, and we all had a sign-up sheet to pick a time for our evaluations. The day I had mine, I was working a split shift because I had class that began 15 minutes after getting off at 12:30 p.m. Usually I'd get off at 6:30 p.m. I had my evaluation scheduled for 9 a.m. While at work, I got pre-approval and would remain on the clock. I was working in the ER that day, and the patient I was with had been up all night and finally went to sleep when I got there. This patient was just waiting for transportation so they could leave. So they slept almost the whole time I was there. I figured that since I had an exam in the class I was going to later that day, that I would study for my exam. I have always been told that I could do schoolwork if there was nothing else to do. 9 a.m. rolls around, and I didn't get called up for an evaluation. Oh well. I asked the nurse to cover for me for a bathroom break, and when I came back, he said that some lady was looking for me. He pointed at her and I didn't recognize her. She came over to me, introduced herself as the new manager that was training, and told me to come up during my lunch break for my evaluation. A lot of things wrong with this. A, I now can't eat until after my classes are done at 5 p.m. that night, because of time. B, it is a state requirement if you work for 6+ hours, you have to get a 30-minute lunch break. And C, they missed the original time I signed up for, and all the spaces were filled, so I wouldn't have an evaluation if I didn't comply. Okay then, sure. I'll clock out for my lunch break and not get paid for my evaluation during that time, when everyone else is getting paid. I went up, and she was with our current manager who was training her. But crazy manager ran the meeting. She looked shocked that nurses and co-workers had nothing but good things to say about me. Current manager left because she assumed the meeting was almost over since I had glowing reviews. Wrong! As soon as she stepped out, crazy manager started. Whisper? Screaming? She was angry that I was studying while with a patient, and how irresponsible it was, even though the patient was totally chill, compliant, and mostly sleeping. That's also when I found out that those points I got with the old manager that I thought had been fixed were still there. She started ranting about how I don't take your job seriously, and how I am lucky you're not getting fired. Excuse me, lady, you aren't my manager yet. I just sat there in silence, though, slumped in my chair, listening to her ramble, that if she had it her way, my co-workers and I wouldn't even be allowed to have a book in the room with a patient. Most shifts were bored because patients slept all day, so we have something to do. So I start to realize that my lunch break is ending in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and by 2 minutes left I finally spoke up. She had been whispered screaming at me about how I'm always late and need to take the company time seriously. I said, okay, well, I can't be late again and get another half point in my record, so I gotta go. Picked up my stuff, smiled at her, and rushed to a station I could clock in at. She was livid. This first interaction with her sparked something inside of her to make it her only goal to get me fired and sink the ship we were in. She began changing a lot of rules that made the nurses we were working with so pissed. She was taking away almost every way we could help a patient, so that our job became basically useless. Of course, I had a plan. I took all of her new rules and complied with every single one. Patient is a fall risk in getting out of bed? Call the nurse to handle it. Patient is getting angry with me. Call the nurse. Patient needs to use the bathroom. Call the nurse. I could handle all of this on my own, but her new rule said that everything we do has to be done with supervision of someone else, including handing a patient a urinal in the bed. These nurses got so mad that me and all of my co-workers were doing this, so I explained to them it was the new manager's rules. Nurses were flocking up to crazy manager's office after their shift to file complaints about how she made our job basically useless. Not to mention, the second that she was done with training, she was giving written warnings to most people for petty things. And this is where the malicious compliance temporarily stopped for me. I thought I was in the clear for all that when I checked my email, and behold, the email saying I need to sign paperwork, or code for I have a written warning for you. I walked in, and she was giving me a written warning for all those points I racked up from a mistake by another person almost a year ago. I explained the situation to her, and she tried to act all friendly with me, saying, I'm so sorry about this. The other managers weren't doing their job, and so my hands are tied, and I have to give you this. I told her that I don't think I have enough points for a written warning, and she slid me the piece of paper saying it was a written verbal warning that I had to sign. What? Since when is something verbal in writing? I told her I already got a verbal warning from 2 managers ago, and she just said, my hands are tied, I need you to sign this. I knew a bunch of my other co-workers who had gotten these had just walked out of the room without signing, so that's what I did. After all the nurse complaints to her, and her realizing that she was sinking the ship of our jobs, it's almost like she just kept pushing new rules and trying to make the ship sink faster. I sent her a 2-week notice because I couldn't handle that job anymore with school, and I was getting treated like crap there even without Crazy Manager being there. I met up with one of my old coworkers that still worked there about 2 months later, and she filled me in. They had another new manager. She told me that crazy manager told everyone that she was retiring, which made no sense since she was in her early to mid-40s. I don't know if she quit, got laid off, or fired, but I know she definitely didn't retire at 40-something. No one ever saw her again in the hospital, so we don't know where she is now. 3. For almost 20 years, I was in the service industry. It helped in a lot of ways, but probably ended up sucking me into that lifestyle for too long. A large portion of my serving and bartending career was at a chain restaurant. Think a house of steak that isn't in front. I had been with this establishment for around 5 years while going through college and starting a master's. I was working at my 4th location due to various moves for school. By this point, I was a server, bartender, trainer, and I had been approached multiple times about MIT, manager in training, but I politely declined. All of this to say, I felt like I had a pretty good standing and history with the company. Well, one day a guy, Chad, who I personally disliked, started going through manager in training. Our mutual dislikes started before my first day at work even. But to be concise, he was indirectly involved in a small confrontation between his friend, me, and the girl his friend was talking to. It's actually a pretty funny story in itself. Chad had a massive superiority, or is it inferiority, complex, probably rooted in his height. Not trying to be a dick or insensitive, but it's my best guess. And although we maintained civility at work, I'm pretty sure we were both aware that we didn't like each other. For several weeks, probably at least 2 months, bartenders weren't making money. For context, the bar area had around 9 booths arranged about the U-shaped bar in the center, but bartenders weren't allowed to take those tables, only guests seated at the bar. After several weeks of walking with $40 to $50, including our bar tip out from servers, on a weekend shift we all began pleading with management to help us. I know I and others asked them to let us have at least a couple of tables in the bar lounge. We're talking 10 feet from the bar. Given that bartending was something you almost always had to work up to, start at server, do well, you have a shot of moving up. We all felt like we had demonstrated the ability to handle the tables, and not allow drink times or bar guests to suffer. Especially as the actual bar was pretty dead most weekends, seeing as we were making so little, so we were all offended to some degree, feeling like it was a double slap in the face of "we don't care about you not making money" and "we don't trust you to handle lounge tables." Morale was low. One day, after we voiced our concerns to deaf ears, when the bar was of course slow, Chad basically orders me to do something like count inventory or some other busy work. At the time, I was batching cocktails and doing bar upkeep, partially because when we got it done, there was a decent chance one of us would be cut. Being cut meant 1, person cut isn't wasting time for little pay, 2, person staying makes more money. So I kind of clipped back something like, "I'm not doing that, I'm busy doing things at the bar. If you want it done, you should do it." At this point I'm pissed because from my perspective, we've been pleading with them to help us. They told us to get fucked. Now you're wasting our time even more with stuff that isn't really our job responsibility. All while you literally stroll around the restaurant doing nothing. Chad, trying to flex his new manager in training position, says, "If you're gonna have that attitude, you can clock out and go home." He clearly wasn't expecting me to simply go, "Okay," and immediately clock out. I turned to the other bartender and told them I was being sent home and I'm sorry. Now, what Chad and the rest of management didn't know was that by pure chance I had ran into a former bartender that left months ago, when things had started to go south. She was at her new serving job and told me she was making great money. So the very next day I applied and used her as a referral. I got the job and immediately put in my 2 weeks at the House of Steak. My proprietor sat me down at my next shift and basically attempted to make amends and asked if I was leaving because of Chad. I said no. I was leaving because we weren't making money and y'all refused to help us. Which is true. The Chad stuff was annoying, but I have never been a person unable to work with those I don't personally like. Well, when the rest of the bartending staff heard about me leaving, they were curious about my new job. I told them the truth. I was making great money and they're hiring. Within 2 weeks, 6 of my former bartending crew left and got hired at the new job. Within another couple of weeks, a few more joined. The House of Steak lost about 70% of their bartending crew and a few servers in the space of a month. They were definitely not pleased, mostly at my new manager as, "That's just something you don't do," but not at me. And wouldn't you know it? A month later, bartenders were allowed to take lunch tables. The staff was not only a really solid group of employees, but our everyday lives were so heavily intertwined. Usually the social group was dominated by, or exclusively, employees. Hell, we played volleyball almost every day one summer, and buckled down when we learned there would be a company tournament. We won, of course. 4. A couple of summers ago, I took a part-time job as a server at a local pub and restaurant. I had a full-time job, so this was just for experience, and to pick up some tip money on the side. The pub had been closed for a few years after the old owner couldn't afford it anymore. So when the new owners picked it up and got it ready for opening again, the town was pretty excited. I applied as soon as I found out and ended up getting hired. I was one of the younger servers, alongside a few older ones. Most of us were women, and the older servers really looked out for us inexperienced ones. Overall, the others on the team were really nice, save for a couple of nasty ones. My new boss, Gary, was, well, not as great. Gary's favorite saying was, "If you have time to lean, you have time to clean." He thought if we took even a second to catch our breaths, he was losing money from us slacking off. On slow days, he would find menial, pointless tasks for us to complete. Wipe the bar counter, even though it's been wiped 3 times in the past half hour already. Reorganize the menus, even though they're already perfectly organized. Fill up more condiment cups, even though there's already 50 salsa cups ready to go. Stuff like that. The most tedious work, especially in the early months of summer, was sweeping the side alley that leads to the patio. There were these massive maple trees along the path, and they would drop leaves and seeds like crazy, especially on windy days. One afternoon in early June, there were only a handful of us working. It gets slow, and I get assigned the sweeping task. I sweep up the back way as much as I can, but the wind is blowing and the trees just keep dumping more and more seeds onto the path. I do my best until a co-worker calls me back inside to serve tables. She didn't want me missing out on tips, bless her. I seat the table, get their orders, and start entering them in. Just then, Gary storms up to me. "What are you doing?" Entering table 15's order. "Why?" "The side alley is a mess. I don't pay you to slack off." I swept as much as I could before this table walked in. It's a really windy day, and it keeps getting full of leaves and seeds. You're more than welcome to check the compost bin for how much I actually did sweep. "No, we don't finish things halfway here. You're going back out there and finishing your job. I want it to be spotless. Linda can take table 15. Gary then switched table 15 from my account to Linda, an older server's account. Linda and I got along great. She worked as both a server and a bartender, and used to be a general manager with another restaurant chain. She decided to join this team after her retirement as a part-time hobby. She taught me a whole lot while I worked there, and I'm grateful to have met her. I'll hang on to your share of the tips, best not to make Gary angry. He really wants me to make it spotless. Does he know how impossible that is? I'd have to be out there all shift. That's when Linda gave me a smile, and the light bulb turned on in my head. I still had 2 hours left in my shift, and it was going to be right into dinner rush. I grabbed the broom and dustpan and got to work. I would sweep as much as I could. but every so often another strong breeze would come by, and hundreds more helicopter seeds would flutter to the ground. I kept going. At this point, it started to get busier. A lineup soon began to form out the door. Linda was taking care of tables, but very soon it became clear that the other servers needed someone else to deal with everyone. Linda let them know what was up, and most of them, who tolerated Gary at best and hated him at worst, understood. I kept on sweeping. Like Sisyphus and the boulder, the task was never ending. I scooped up pile after pile after pile of leaves and seeds, to no avail. After 45 minutes or so, the side door opened suddenly to reveal a red-faced Gary. "Why aren't you in there serving customers?" I gestured at the alleyway, as if the gods themselves had heard the malicious complaints brewing. Another strong breeze shook more seeds onto the partially cleared alley, right in front of Gary's face. The look on his face was priceless. He told me, in a quieter voice, to get back inside and start taking orders. I handed the broom off to him, and he began to sweep, and sweep, and sweep. The other servers and I had a good laugh about it inside, and I managed to make decent tips that night. Gary realized he couldn't exactly fire me for following his orders perfectly, and ended up being more relaxed about the side alley. No one really cares about some leaves and seeds on the ground, so long as they're not obstructing anyone. I ended up working there for the rest of the summer before quitting. I hear the pub had to be passed on to new owners after Gary's disorganization got the better of him. My next shift, I found a broken broom in the garbage. I'd like to think it was the work of Gary, red in the face and exhausted from battling against Mother Nature. 5. To clarify what this is about, y'all need to know a few things. I used to work in a franchise hardware and furniture store. My focus used to be helping customers in stocking. We had two supervisors, Jim and Dick. Jim is the MVP of the store, wants it to succeed, and has a vision for his employees. One of those people that actually inspires you to do your best. Dick is a side supervisor. He's just a sidekick that seems incapable of leadership. He is largely unable to reflect and direct, as he doesn't understand why we do things the way they're done. So, at the time this took place, I already had a new job lined up, and my relationship with Dick wasn't something you'd call optimal. When my new job was solid, I gave Jim notice of my intention to quit. He then asked me if I wanted to do some extra work by converting shelves to the new plans from higher up. I told him I did want to help out as much as possible. I mean, getting some extra cash is always nice. So I started working. I was dressed in my usual uniform and worked every day for a week. There was one problem, though. Due to me being dressed as an employee, and the next 2 weeks being amongst the busiest of the year, loads of people asked me questions. I'm always glad to help customers whenever I can, but I also had a tight deadline. I had 4 weeks to finish converting half of the store. That is about 1 kilometer of aisles with tons of small stuff, think screws, nails, hammers, etc. I would need the full 4 weeks without that much interruption. So wanting to do the best I could for Jim, we agreed that since I wasn't doing the regular work, I could fill in the workdays I saw fit, taking breaks when I wanted as long as I made the 8 hours and being allowed to dress in plain clothes and listen to music. Honestly, I just listened to Critical Role a lot of the time. Then, on a fateful, gymless day, Dick came along. He wasn't having any of it. He got my attention and asked me what the hell I thought I was doing. "You should be dressed in your uniform. Do your job and help customers." Ironically, this same Dick once got angry at me because I was helping customers instead of stocking shelves, but that's another story. I told Dick that my tasks had shifted from being a general stocking and sales employee to aisle conversion, and that I had a tight schedule. If you have a problem, you should take it up with Jim. Dick got visibly mad, scolded me for not having my priorities straight again, and made the day complete and utter shit. He kinda smeared me among my colleagues as lazy and irresponsible. Dick has always been a pain in the ass to work with. and he must have been in a particularly bad mood under a lot of pressure. I had never seen him do something that shitty before. To me, if you're supposed to lead a group of people, then you don't do that kind of shit. So I was really irritated and just done with the day after that. Cut to the next day. It was Dick Day again. He was team lead. Great. I was sitting in the break room before shift started with a colleague who was a Jim 2.0 in the making. I had been venting to him about how much of a dick had been yesterday. He was telling me about how there were these 3 sick people that day, and they couldn't find replacements. It was a beautiful summer day. You work in a giant metal box with subpar climate control, and you'd have to work with Dick. Can you imagine why it was so hard to find replacements? Also, if you're missing 3 people on a team of 8, you're basically in crisis. I liked the dude, so I told him that I was almost done with my aisle, and if the day went okay, without any drama from Dick, I wouldn't let them hanging. So 10 minutes before the store opened, we went down with high hopes and good intentions, as my colleague was supposed to. Such a shame that the clock in the break room ran late, and we arrived 5 minutes too late. Imagine sympathizing with your colleagues, telling them you'll help if the day is without drama, and then coming down into the store to immediately get scolded. Well, that's what fucking happened. I got blamed for being too late, being unproductive, and he said that I was supposedly dragging your colleagues down with you. As if they don't have any agency. I was seething. I told him exactly what was on my mind. Brutally honest is a term you could use. I was there to do a job and help them. I wasn't there to be berated for stupid shit, and this way of starting off the day was pretty demotivating. I might have used harsher words. He yelled at me that I could just as well go home then. They didn't need me to convert the aisles anyway, and I was useless in any other respect. That was the last straw. He had me fuming. You know those cartoons where there's smoke coming out of their ears? Yeah, that was me. I went, "Oh, really? Can I really? Are you absolutely sure?" And sweet baby Jesus, Dick said I really could, so I went. I packed my stuff and went home. On my way out, I saw the disappointed face of Jim 2.0 that I had intended to help them out by taking up my old, regular duties when I was done with my aisle, because I got a call from Dick about 30 minutes after I got home. He asked if I couldn't just come and help. In my mind, he was practically begging at this point. I was still mad at him, so I told him that I didn't want to drag them down with me, so I'd have to decline. I went by the store to pick up some hardware stuff for my own project, see how they were doing, and express sympathy to my co-workers. But the highlight was seeing Dick struggle, lines of customers waiting for someone to help them. I saw Dick with sweat rolling from his red and bald head, sawing for people in the sawing room. One of the most painful places of the store, as it was extremely dusty and had no climate control whatsoever, with 3 people waiting and more people writing out sawing jobs. He'd been there all day. Seeing that and the plea for help on the phone was pretty satisfying to me. Now, I've not just been taught to stick true to your word, but also that you shouldn't hold grudges. This means that I really believe in at least trying to talk things out. So a few days later I went to talk to Dick about what had happened. Of course, I did not do that without Jim. We kinda made up. Dick got a little bit of a scolding, I got a little bit of a scolding. Sure, we're both at fault and acted unprofessionally for butting heads like that. I'm glad it happened, though. Jim pulled me off the aisle conversion therapy, and it was the last week, so he told me to just use my last paid sick days to cover the week. That was my last adventure with Dick. At least this one. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 76. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And please do hit that like button in any fashion that's convenient to you, or get someone else to do it for you. You could think about it really hard, but I tend to find actually clicking or booping it with your finger works best. Leave a comment also if you're feeling up to it, and if you'd like to see more videos and you're not subscribed, then please do subscribe. That all helps the channel out greatly. I was recording these stories live. Someone mentioned getting your pet to do it. Not a bad idea. Pets love Hellfreezer. You know, I haven't had a curry for months and months and months because tummy just couldn't handle it. I think we're almost at the point that I can. I've got everything I need right now to do a quick curry, or a quick curry, not a proper. Doing it properly, I'd get fresh mushrooms and fresh onions because those are essential ingredients for a curry, at least for me. I don't have those things, but I do have, which isn't ideal, but like I say, it's good for a spur-of-the-moment thing. I've got frozen mushrooms and frozen onions, frozen chicken, and I've got the sauce, which is easy to make up. So I could have that curry, we'll see. Well, I'll see. I mean, I'm not going to make enough for everyone. I mean, there's like over 72,000 of you. That'd be a lot of rice. Damn. Okay, anyway, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.